Hey YouTube, welcome back to Tinker with Tools. For the third time in as many months, Milwaukee's got a new circular saw, so let's go ahead and check it out on Tinker with Tools. Alright, so you heard me right. This is the third brand new circular saw that Milwaukee has come out with in the last few months, and we have tested the first two, both the M12 Fuel 5 3/8 circ saw and then the new M18 6.5-inch Fuel circ saw. And with both of those saws, I think we saw good generational improvement, especially on the M18 circular saw. You just saw a much smaller saw that was also going to be more powerful and more premium. And really, when I purchased that 6.5-inch circular saw, I thought that was going to be my circ saw endgame for the majority of the tasks I was doing. Every once in a while, you're obviously going to need more power, and that's where some of these bigger, more powerful saws come in. Now, traditionally speaking, I grew up using Blade Right 7.25-inch Sidewinder circular saws. When I started to get into tools, my dad bought me a Sidewinder 7.25 Bosch model, and it was for quite a while. That was the saw that I used on a lot of things. I did eventually get a cordless saw, but it always just kind of left me thinking the portability was great, but the power just wasn't quite there. And that's when I started to get into some slightly more premium saws, that first generation of Milwaukee 6.5-inch. And that's where I first tried a blade left saw. And I instantly fell in love with blade left saws. Being a right-handed user, it just made much more natural cuts, in my opinion, to be able to do it on a blade left saw. And so it's just something that I gravitated toward. And so when they first announced the saw, I wasn't even sure that I was going to be getting it. But then they announced two things about how they were releasing these tools. First, it was going to be coming with a new Forge 12 amp hour in its kit. And I did want to get my hands on that battery first and foremost. And then second, the rear handle circular saw wasn't coming out until next year. And so with that, I decided to go ahead and place my pre-order for this saw. Now, first I want to talk about what is going to be different with this new generation of saw. In terms of length, the saw really actually didn't decrease. I don't have the old 7.25-inch saw to compare it to, but from everything I've read, this one is actually a 1/4 inch longer in terms of overall length front to back. Where it did decrease in size significantly is in the width of the saw. The old model was almost a full foot wide by the time you got out to the edge of the motor. This one is actually only about 7.5 inches wide, and so it is a big reduction in size. The way they were able to do that is they do have a new motor design that they talked about at Pipeline with their segmented motor design that they actually start with it in pieces, wind the copper around it, and then assemble the motor together. What you end up with is a more compact yet more power dense motor, and with that, a nice reduction in size. Weight wise from the old saw, that one was over 9 pounds. This one is down to 7.9 pounds, so you're also getting a reduction in weight. They did change the shoe design on it like they did on that 6.5-inch, so gone are some of the really nice clear markings, and now this is going to that new style like the one we saw on the 6.5-inch. Now, like I said, this is a blade right saw, and so for me, that doesn't give me as good of visibility on the cut line, but overall, it's not a bad saw to use. They have made sure that you have decent visibility from the left-hand side of the saw for right-handed users to be able to see that. And I think that as far as blade right saws go, this one is pretty good. Next up, they did increase the bevel angle on the saw. The old saw was max bevel of 50 degrees. This is a max bevel of 57 degrees. They're going to be detents at 0, 22.5, and 45 for those common angles. And so far, being able to switch between them seems pretty natural, and you're going to be able to flip back and forth between those pretty easily and effortlessly. This one did increase in its depth of cut capacity by just ever so slightly, 1/8 of an inch. Went from 2.5 inches on the old saw up to 2 5/8 on this saw. Now, they also did include a vacuum attachment for it. It does normally just have a side ejection here for the dust, but you can go ahead and screw this on that is included with it, and then it has a vacuum port back here. Now, the last thing that has changed from the prior generation of saws, pretty much most of the cordless circular saws that I've had have a little paddle that you have to depress before you can go ahead and press the trigger, almost like a double safety mechanism. This one is a little different because you now just basically have an on-off switch for the safety of the tool. When it's in its locked position, the trigger is locked out and you cannot turn on the tool, but flip it over and now you can go ahead and depress the trigger and the saw will turn on. They do offer a new blade with this circular saw, and instead of being a thin kerf blade like what you're seeing with the majority of your circular saw blades, this is now a thick kerf blade. Now, the idea behind thin kerf blades is that traditionally older style circular saws were not necessarily powerful enough to push through a full kerf blade through a piece of wood, and so going to a thin kerf actually made the cuts a little more effortless and made the saws feel a little bit peppier. I think what we're getting to now is we're getting to saws that are powerful enough that they no longer need to have a thin kerf blade. And obviously when you move up to a thick kerf blade, you are going to be able to get a little bit less deflection because that blade's going to be a little bit sturdier and more rigid. For right now, this one is cutting fine, so we'll go ahead and use it for a while and kind of try and give you some feedback later on how it's performing. Now, the other thing I mentioned about this kit in particular is it comes kitted with their new Forge 12.0 battery. Now, previously, Milwaukee has had a 12.0 battery, their HO 12.0, and that was always considered to be their most powerful battery. At the Pipeline event in 2023, they actually unveiled the first Forge battery, the Forge 6.0, and at that release, they actually talked about the different power levels of battery. Over all the way in power level 1, you have like their CP 2.0 battery, and then when you step up into power level 3, that's where you're talking about some of those initial high output batteries like the 6.0. When they announced that 6 amp hour Forge battery, that's when they started talking about power level 4. Well, now we're going to be getting a few more batteries, and first and foremost is this M18 Forge 12.0 battery, and that is the lone battery that is going to be up in what they're calling power level 5. Additionally, with this new battery, you are going to be getting what they're calling cool cycle, which when paired with a cool cycle charger allows the battery to be cooled faster when it comes off the tool, which makes it so they can start charging it more quickly after getting onto the charger. And then, of course, they're able to go ahead and charge it faster. What it comes kitted with in here is just going to be their rapid charger. Now, from everything I can tell, this one is going to charge roughly twice as fast as what you're going to be getting from that standard Milwaukee charger, but it is not actually a cool cycle battery charger, so you're going to have to go up to that dual bay one to get that. When you pair it with that most powerful charger, this battery can actually get up to 80% capacity in just 35 minutes. So I think the big benefit of these Forge batteries is definitely being able to charge them more rapidly while keeping them cool better, and then obviously that's going to mean more uptime on the tool as you're going to be doing it on some of these more power hungry tools. All right, so now for performance testing, we are going to compare this to a couple of the other circular saws that I have. Now, I understand that those are not 7¼ inch blade right sidewinder saws, and so it's not necessarily a true direct comparison, but I don't have any other 7¼ inch circular saws other than a corded Bosch model, so that is what we're going to be comparing it to first and foremost. Additionally, we will do a couple of runs with the 6½ inch Fuel circular saw. So if that is something that you've got as a frame of reference, you're going to be able to tell where this one ranks in terms of power and performance against that. Now, in terms of the testing we did, I work in a really quite tiny shop. Cutting an 8-foot long cut is really something that the shop is not designed to be best suited for. And so I apologize for getting in front of the camera on some of those longer cuts. Hopefully you're still able to see what's going on, but let's go ahead and get to the testing and then I'll come back and summarize it. All right, so with that performance testing, here are kind of the conclusions that I made using the saw. First and foremost, I don't have that frame of reference of what the old 7¼ inch circular saw was, but I do have other circular saws to compare to. And so far, this does appear to be the strongest circular saw that I have. In terms of the different cuts, if all you're doing is cross cuts in 2x material, even up to 2x6s and 2x8s, I think you're going to be a little bit hard pressed to truly notice the performance difference on some of these saws. That's a task that they can all do pretty well. When you start to go to those longer cuts in that triple stack of OSB, that's where you start to notice the performance difference of the top saws that we're testing. And previously, like I said, that FlexVolt saw really just stood up above all the rest of the saws that I've ever tried. And now this one has not only gone up there with it, but surpassed it a little bit in my opinion. Now this was by no means comprehensive testing. I get there are other things that people are going to test and be able to see. And so I welcome any and all testing from other channels. But in all reality, from everything I've been able to tell, I really think this is a tremendous improvement for Milwaukee going to this new design that is going to be significantly more compact and overall just a lot more powerful. Now, we did not do a lot of testing on other batteries to see what the performance is like there. I dare say that if you're still on some of their more modern batteries, you may not get quite the punch that you're getting on the new Forge 12.0. But for example, if you're running on a 6 amp hour Forge or something like that, it still does perform well. It's just not quite as strong as what you're going to be getting on that 12.0 battery. Ergonomically speaking, the saw is decent. I have no real complaints. I think I'm always going to prefer a blade left, whether it's going to be in the rear handle in the 7¼ inch size or that 6½ inch size. I'm excited for when they come out with the new rear handle saw next year, because I really think that is the saw I'm going to want to own and use. This saw is making me want that saw to get here sooner and sooner, but we're going to have to wait until Milwaukee releases it. Go ahead and let me know if you have any questions down below. Obviously, there's a lot more testing we could do with this, and we will continue to use it, and I'll report back anything I find in the future. So far, highly impressed with it. If you like this sort of video, go ahead and hit that like button, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you get notified when I put out a new video. And as always, thank you for all the support. I'll catch you next time on Tinker with Tools.